Welcome back to Watches and Politics. I'm your host, Eddie Schipoli, and this is episode 10, the present tense. For 9 episodes, we've explored how watches shaped empires, shaped wars, diplomacy, and shaped revolutions. But today, we're not looking back, we're looking around us. We're looking about today, the present tense. This is a fast-paced tour through 10 ways in which watches intersect with politics, with power, and with culture right now, today. From blockchain to sanctions to gender to nationalism and Instagram influencers, Horology in 2025 isn't just about telling time. It's about telling the world who's in charge. Think of this episode as a dispatch from the front line. The trade desk, the diplomatic cocktail hour, the encrypted WhatsApp chat. The game didn't stop, it just put on a sleeker dial. So let's begin. The first question we always get is if watches are art or scientific instruments. So what is a watch today? Art, scientific instrument, jewelry, tool, legacy? The answer is all of the above. On one hand, watches have entered a cultural canon. Vacheron Constantine's Materials d'Art collections treat dials as miniature canvases showcasing cloisonne enamel, engraving, and gem setting often tied to world culture. Exhibitions at the Louvre, the Met, the Art Basel elevate Cartier, Audemars Piguet, Richard Mille into fine art, transforming horology into a form of cultural diplomacy. Collections from figures like Sheikh Hamad bin Abdullah Al Thani or King Farouk of Egypt aren't just indulgences. They're national signals of taste and prestige. Yet the line between homage and excess remains contested. A Closin Patek world map might be hailed as cultural tribute, while a rainbow Rolex Daytona splits opinion between genius and vulgarity. But make no mistake, watches are also scientific instruments. Once vital to empire, now central to modern identity. In the 18th century, John Harrison's marine chronometers solved the longitude problem, securing Britain's naval supremacy. In the 20th century, the Omega Speedmaster became an icon of the Cold War when Armstrong and Aldrin wore it to the moon. Even today, functionality carries geopolitical meaning. The Breitling emergency, for example, with its distress beacon, Seiko's dive watches used by Japanese explorers, or Citizen's earthquake tracking models. These timepieces blur the line between science and sovereignty, between precision and pride. And in our digital age, that science has turned inward. Smartwatches from Apple, Garmin, and Tag Heuer collect biometric data, heart rate, oxygen, sleep cycles, and transmit it far beyond the wrist. That creates a new kind of politics. Who owns the data, who profits from it, and who might weaponize it? In this way, watches remain dual symbols, at once cultural ambassadors and scientific instruments of power. Whether adorned with enamel art or loaded with health metrics, a watch today doesn't just tell time. It tells the story of who controls it. Number 2 most discussed question today are sanctions, tariffs, and the luxury markets. Well, watches may seem like harmless luxuries, but in geopolitics, they've become currency. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Swiss brands, including Rolex, Patek, Audemars Piguet, Richard Mille, Vacheron Constantin, Jaeger LeCoultre, they halted exports under Western sanctions. Yet, demand didn't just vanish like that. It slipped underground. Oligarchs sourced pieces through Turkey, the UAE, Central Asia, with great dealers, couriers, and even diplomatic pouches keeping the market alive. Iran, for example, runs a similar shadow economy, funneling Swiss pieces through Dubai and Istanbul, while in North Korea, luxury watches remain coveted gifts for inner circle elite of the government. A Patek Philippe on a sanctioned wrist becomes more than jewelry. It's a quiet assertion of prestige against political isolation or against sanctions and tariffs and stuff like that. Tariffs add another layer of fragility. During the US-EU trade spats of 2019 or 2020, watches nearly faced 100% duties, a threat that revealed how vulnerable heritage houses like Omega, Cartier, Rolex, and others are to protectionist swings. The industry has responded with lobbying, supply chain diversification, and turning fairs like Watches and Wonders into diplomatic stages where trade, terms, and tasks risks are quietly discussed. In both sanctions and tariffs, watches aren't just commodities, they are symbols. They can be smuggled across the borders, weaponized in populist debates, or auctioned after seizures. Every luxury timepiece carries a political charge. Loyalty in one regime, elitism in another, but never neutrality. For over a century, Switzerland defined horology's crown, but nationalism is reshaping the map. In India, nostalgia for HMT, founded in 1961 with Citizen, fuels a revival of post-colonial pride, while startups offer India-inspired designs. Grand Seiko now competes head-on with Swiss luxury by leaning into Japanese aesthetics like snowflake dials and spring drive tech. Germany's A. Lange & Söhne, reborn after the reunification, projects Teutonic precision and order, while Britain's Bremont is pushing British-built prestige post-Brexit with its wing factory. Each of these revivals signals more than commerce. It's cultural sovereignty expressed through timekeeping. However, golf has taken this nationalism to a new level. Dubai Watch Week has transformed into a soft power hub where oil wealth, crypto money, and global CEOs converge, making horology a diplomatic stage. Saudi Arabia, through Vision 2030, is investing heavily in luxury retail and auctions as part of its image-building strategy, what some call watch washing. But big brands entering these markets walk a fine line, localizing campaigns, choosing ambassadors with geopolitical care, and often staying silent on issues of labor, censorship, or other uncomfortable topics. The message is clear: watchmaking is no longer just Swiss dominance, but a global competition of narratives, of identities, and political soft power. Today, we have to deal with celebrity diplomacy and watch brand ambassadors, which is something that we get asked often. In today's world, a celebrity can project as much diplomatic weight as a head of state. Roger Federer's partnership with Rolex embodies Swiss humility and excellence, while Brad Pitt with Breitling merges Hollywood glamour with adventurous internationalism. These pairings aren't just accidents. They are curated soft power, turning risks into billboards for national ideals. In China, for example, where political sensitiveness are acute, Omega, Tag Heuer, Longines, they carefully pick party-approved ambassadors, while in the Gulf, ties to royalty and cultural influencers make ambassadorships part of a broader state diplomacy. And global athletes like Naomi Osaka with Tag Heuer or Kylian Mbappé with Hublot bring activism, bring youth, and cultural pride into the narrative of watchmaking. Independent choices can be just as political. When leaders or collectors wear an FP jaune or a carved linen, it signals independence from mainstream luxury narratives. But ambassadorships come, of course, with controversy. When stars represent brands tied to opaque supply chains or authoritarian markets, they risk complicity. Still, the symbolism is undeniable. A tourbillon at Davos, a moon phase on live TV, a chronograph at Peace Summit, these aren't just endorsements. They are messages. In the 21st century, a celebrity ambassador doesn't just sell a watch. They project power, they project identity, and they project cultural diplomacy, one wrist at a time. You cannot pass through these questions without talking about blockchain, about counterfeits, and provenance. Counterfeits have long haunted horology and watchmaking industry, but blockchain is rewriting the rules of authenticity. Brands like Audemars Piguet and Vacheron Constantin now issue blockchain-backed digital passports to track ownership, to track service, and to track repairs, erasing the old paper cards and promising transparency. Yet, this shift raises political questions. Blockchain systems are often privately controlled, meaning provenance is still curated by brands and institutions rather than fully decentralized. Who decides what counts as authentic, what gets logged, or what gets erased tomorrow or next day? That's not just technology, it's about governance. And with NFTs entering the mix, the debate deepens. Is a digital-only watch on the blockchain ownership or merely a rented illusion of prestige? These are questions that everybody can answer individually. However, jurisdiction complicates things even further. A watch certified as on a Swiss blockchain, traded through a US platform and resold in Dubai. Whose laws apply? Governments eye these digital ledgers as tools for taxation or regulation, while collectors worry about surveillance. Every trade logged, every movement traced. Provenance has always been about trust, but now it's about data sovereignty too. In this new landscape, a blockchain-certified Patek isn't just a watch. It's a statement of alignment with a whole new system of power. One where code and cryptography arbitrate legitimacy. While we talk about representation, gender and feminization of luxury is also an important question. For most of its modern history, watchmaking has been a man's world. Oversized pilots, rugged divers, chronographs sold with imagery of cars, planes, conquest. But women are changing that narrative today, collecting Speedmasters, Daytonas, Royal Oaks, and vintage military pieces, which were once exclusively marketed to men. High-profile leaders like Catherine Renier at Jaeger-LeCoultre or Chabi Nouri at Piaget have pushed structural change from the top. While unisex sizing and mid-range models from 36 to 38 millimeters are blurring old categories. Representation is no longer confined to jewelry like women's pieces. It's about women owning complications, aesthetic, heritage, and stories that once were kept off limits for women. Still, the gender divide lingers there, however. Many brands continue to segregate products, lines, and pricing women's models lower or reducing them to gem-set accessories or quartz watches. Yet data shows women influence a huge share of luxury purchases, and the market is slowly catching up. Every campaign that shows a woman commanding a perpetual calendar or a tourbillon is more than marketing. It is a political statement. It rewrites the story of who owns time. And in that rewriting, watchmaking becomes not just a craft, but a cultural battleground over identity and power. Today, we live in a virtual world. We live together with Instagram collectors, influencers, and a lot of propaganda. Once private, collecting has become a global performance stage on Instagram, on YouTube, and on TikTok. Wrist shots, unboxing, and wrist checks shape trends overnight, often fueled by brand partnerships. Influencers receive free pieces, trips, VIP access, and this turns their content into a subtle form of lobbying. Governments are sometimes on it. The UAE and Saudi Arabia host watch influencers at Dubai Watch Week and Riyadh Seasons to rebrand their nations as luxury hubs. What looks like lifestyle posting is often soft power in motion. But the impact is very real. A celebrity post can send prices soaring. The John Mayer Daytona effect, for example, or the Pharrell bomb. Ripples through the resale market instantly are done through this effect. But this influencer economy creates also hierarchies. Voices without followers, access, or brand ties rarely get heard. The politics of taste is now algorithmic, filtered by cloud. The next time a perfectly lit royal oak pops up on your feed, ask yourself, is it just a watch photo or a carefully coded projection of influence, and by who? Recently, there is this question that we keep asking about lobbying and the watch industry. With sanctions and everything going on, tariffs, we talk about lobbying. Behind the quiet tick of Swiss movements, of course, lies active lobbying as well. The watch industry, which is worth over 25 billion francs in exports, defends its turf in Brussels and, of course, here in Washington, D.C. Environmental rules tied to the EU Green Deal are countered with arguments that heirloom watches aren't disposable goods. The sacred Swiss-made label, for example, requiring 60% of production costs in Switzerland, remains heavily protected through legal battles and diplomatic pressures, since that inscription can make or break a watch's market value. In the US, lobbying shields Swiss watches from tariffs and customs snags. During the first Trump administration, retaliatory tariffs battles nearly slapped 100% duties on luxury watches. Behind the scenes, Swiss firms mobilized to dodge that inclusion. Now in Trump's second term, Swiss imports face 39% tariffs, sparking another lobbying blitz. Standard bodies like ISO also became battlegrounds as Swiss brands influenced definition of chronometer testing, water resistance, that double as trade barriers. It's politics by other means, quiet, precise, and relentless. What about the whole ecosystem behind the watch? What I call the shadow industry, where power and politics plays a big role also with other suppliers. Luxury brands project seamless heritage, but beneath the dial lies a hidden network of subcontractors, of artisans, and of suppliers. Case makers in Geneva, enamelers in La Chaux de Fonds, movement specialists in the Jura, many working anonymously for multiple brands, but they are the ones that keep the industry alive. Even outsourcing to Hong Kong or Thailand for polishing or bracelet production contradicts with the old Swiss methodology. But this invisibility protects brand prestige while masking the real, politically loaded supply chain that is affected by any geopolitical change. Beyond production, an ecosystem of PR firms, insurers, security companies, they all shape perception and project value. Lifestyle magazines, influencer agencies, and auction houses manufacture that desirability, deciding which models become icons and which collectors get crowned as tastemakers. Add in the financialization of the watches, vaulting, insuring, trading as assets, and we see horology turning into a stratified system of portable wealth. The shadow industry isn't just about making watches. It's about structuring power, shielding elites, and curating cultural memory. Let's finish with the last question about watches as political arenas. At the pinnacle of luxury, scarcity itself is political. The Rolex Daytona, Patek Philippe 5711, and Richard Mille models aren't scarce because they can't be made. They're scarce because access is curated. Waitlists become velvet ropes, shaping microeconomies where prestige is traded, not just bought. The secondary market and auction houses amplify the scarcity into spectacles. Philips Geneva sales, where Pateks fetch $8 million, or Richard Mille break records. Each hammer strikes manufacturer's value and writes cultural history. But increasingly, watches aren't worn anymore, they are stored. Traded like gold bars, they're stacked into vaults, traded as financial instruments, and bundled into hedge fund portfolios like wine or art is. Passionate collectors risk being priced out while boutiques reserve stock for investor buyers. The soul of watch collecting is shifting from connoisseurship to capital. Today, the showroom is a theater, the auction is diplomacy, and the wrist remains the final frontier of soft power. In the end, the real question is, are we collecting watches or are watches collecting us? So here we are, 10 snapshots from the present tense. Proof that the politics of timekeeping is anything but past tense. From blockchain ledgers to auction podiums, from Geneva's ateliers to Dubai's luxury fairs, watches are still instruments of measurement, but also instruments of meaning. They tick on the wrists of presidents, circulating in oligarch networks, get vaulted by billionaires, and spark debates in trade commissions. They're at once soft power, then hard currency, and sometimes cultural propaganda. We've seen how diplomacy, gender, nationalism, secrecy, and even algorithms shape the watch world. We've traced how a tiny component made in an obscure workshop links into a global chain of labor, prestige, and inequality. This isn't a story of nostalgia. It's the living politics of now. Watches today aren't just heirlooms or tools. They're battlegrounds. Their value rests as much on politics, who gains success, who writes the story, who defines time itself, as it does on artistry and rarity. And that's the final paradox. Time moves forward, but in horology, history and politics always travel alongside. Every tick is a reminder that watches don't just keep time, they keep score.